Um, so look, just before we kick things off, I have a couple of things that I do need to say. Due to the nature of the event today, can I ask that nobody takes photographs or takes any videos, because there is going to be some sensitive information. So we do ask you to do that. And if you have your phones on, if you could please put them on silent as well. What else I should say is we do have the event being filmed today. So if anyone has any issues or don't want to be filmed, please do speak to one of the VIBS team and we will make sure that you're not in the video, okay? Just one other thing I do need to say is today you will hear some sensitive information. Some things might trigger people. We do have some professional help here today. So if you do need help, or you do need to speak to someone, please reach out to any of the VIBS team. We're all in the same t-shirts and we'll get you some help today. So, just to really say a few words before we really hand over to all the rest of the volunteers here today. So, if anyone would like to share some information today, please feel free to speak to one of us, okay? This event is not about VIBS, it's not about the volunteers, it's about those guys or people who have been seriously injured or bereaved by the COVID injections, okay? So if you would like to tell your story, we have someone here today who can take you aside and will film and interview you if you want to share your story. If you do want to say something at the end, feel free. There will be a question and answer session, so I will ask that if everyone can please hold off any questions until the time that we make available towards the end for questions and answers, okay? So how do VIBS come into being? Myself, like everyone else, we've all witnessed and we've all heard the stories, and we've all had our own stories to tell of people who have been injured and bereaved by the vaccine, COVID vaccine program. Sorry, I'll say injection, not vaccine. So over the past couple of years, hearing these stories and hearing how this has affected people, we decided that we need to do something, that everyone who has been affected does need to have some support, and there just is no support out there in Northern Ireland. We need to give people a voice because your voices and those affected are being silenced, and no more. Voices will no longer be silenced. This will not be pushed to the side any longer, and we are here to support you. We are here to give you a voice. We are here to also lobby and change policy, which is what my role will be, okay? With the vaccine payout damage of only £120,000, we need to change that. We need to ensure that that figure is pushed up, and we need to ensure that it's a lot easier to obtain. So that's what's really all about today. You're not alone, and this is what this is about today. It's about you. So the order of what's going to happen today is you're going to hear from some of our volunteers. We will break then at about 2 o'clock, 2:30 for a break. After that, you will hear some stories from those who have been affected. You'll also hear from Paul Few, politician, and we're delighted that Paul is showing support and sympathetic to what we're trying to do today. Also, you'll hear from a solicitor, Michael Brentnell, who will be here today also as well, okay? So look, if anyone needs to talk to any of us for any reason, please do pull us throughout the day, okay? Please keep the questions until the question and answer session as well. So look, it's about you, and I'll leave it over to the rest of the VIBS team. So it's always a woman keeps a man in check. It's over to Charlene, and she'll tell you what her role is within VIBS.
I just brought a wee prompt card just to keep myself on track because I'm a bit of a storyteller. My professional skills and my moral compass is why I'm here today. I have operations experience, people management experience, and I am NEBOSH qualified in the management of health and safety. So my role is to support the group operationally, but most importantly as a friend. So I have been volunteering over the years with Darren through Advocacy and Rights Network. So when we received the call about having conversations about this, it just came naturally for me. So this was a natural thing for me to do. I do work well with Darren. I work with Kathy on a couple of different things, and Jonathan as well. So, like I say, I do like to volunteer. I have a lot of volunteer experience, even, before the COVID injections. And helping people brings me joy. So I hope that through supporting the group and being able to support other people, that I will be able to bring some joy into the lives of those who think they are affected by the COVID injections and those who have been bereaved. These guys really are like the best bunch of people to work with. I mean, if this was a paid role and I was their boss, they'd all be on well over 100 grand a year. Everything is so easy, so supportive, so efficient, so effective, and they've a heart of gold. They've honestly a heart of gold. I'm delighted to now be able to stand here in front of you all and say that I am friends with Sharon and Ken. It's been an absolute pleasure to get to know them, and they will introduce themselves when it's time. So really, I also have personal motivation for standing here in front of you all today and for being a part of setting this up. I had an older friend, beautiful soul, in her mid-60s. She was the grandmother of my daughter George's friend, and we became really friendly at the school gates. So Deirdre was a lovely woman, and she really touched my heart, and she always made me smile. Deirdre's health deteriorated when she took the COVID injections, and after a few months she'd done her own research, and then she came to thinking that maybe her ill health was down to the COVID injections. Unfortunately, I never got as far as what I would have liked to with her, because she died on the 19th of October last year. So I'm here in front of you today and as part of this team because I want to do something positive to remember my friend. So the 19th isn't always going to be doom and gloom for me, and then I can move on. Because when that happened, I didn't have anywhere to go with my questions or my worries. I was fearful of judgment, and the only place I could turn to was to half of the people sitting at that top table, and they listened to me without judgment. So I had a safe space to ask questions and to talk about what was going on inside my head. Just due to my personal life and my eldest daughter being very unwell herself, which is not related to this, it is extremely important to me that people have a safe space where they can go to ask questions about medical products, in particular the effects that medical products can and do have. So I am delighted to be a part of this, and I hope that using my skills will, grow this, and that we can all be there for people when they need us. Thanks. We're all really not good at this. Over to Kathy now. Kathy's the best.
Bless you. Good afternoon, everybody. And again, as Darren and Charlene have already said, thank you very much for being here today. It's an absolute pleasure to meet all of you and to put some faces to the voices that I've spoken to over the phone. Gives me great pleasure. So thank you. Like Charlene, I am a mother and I'm a grandmother. And I'm going to come back to that in a wee second because it's a very important reason why I'm here today. My role within the group is more on the legal side, the legal aspect, and liaising with solicitors and referring people on to solicitors who need that help. I also do have a little bit of a responsibility for sponsorship as well within the group. So before I even continue, I'd like to extend my greatest thanks to Pat and to John. You know who you are, because it was their financial support that was given for today's event to actually get the ball rolling and get this event up and running so that more people can see these speeches, more people can hear the stories that are going to be told today, and more people are going to not have the fear. They're going to have the bravery to come forward and tell their stories. I think that is very much what today is all about. It's us meeting each other, sharing our stories, being there for one another, but also to create the awareness. The awareness that people can actually now contact VIBS and I, because prior to this, there was nobody for anybody to contact. There was no centre. GP surgeries were possibly not listening to people who felt they were vaccine injured. They were dismissing them and basically turning around and saying, it's in your head. So creating this group, I think, is fundamental. Creating this group to give the people the opportunity for somewhere to contact, somebody to speak to, where they can feel that they are not alone. And that's actually why we actually had on the back of our T-shirts, we actually put, "You're not alone." So everybody in this room, you're not alone. And everybody out there in Northern Ireland, you're not alone. Come forward, speak to us, and get your voice heard. Tell your story. So the other thing I'd like to do also, just before I move on, is thank Shane at the back, who's filming us today, for volunteering his time today. We're really, from the team, we greatly appreciate it, Shane. Thank you very much. And again, like I said, thank you to Pat and to John for the sponsorship in getting today up and running. Really appreciate it. I'm going to come back to, I am a mother and I am a grandmother. But I'm going to hold this lovely lady up. And this lovely lady was also a mother and a grandmother. And this is the reason why I'm here today. This lovely lady's name is Teresa. And Teresa was taken from us because of the COVID-19 vaccines, from her injuries. Her daughter Debbie and her husband Maliki are sitting here in front of me. And I thank you and I commend your bravery for being here today. And I really appreciate you actually coming. Debbie will be telling her story. Debbie and Maliki will be telling their story after the coffee break. It is absolutely horrendous, but I believe that people need to hear their story and believe that the story has to be told and for everybody out there to know exactly what happened to Teresa. So Teresa, you are my hero, you are my inspiration, and you are the reason why I'm standing up here today speaking out for her acknowledgement. Just going to put that down because I don't have sand. The other reason why I started off with this absolutely amazing team, like Charlene said, it's the best bunch of people to work with, so supportive, so friendly, so efficient, absolutely brilliant, pleased to be part of the team, is with having my granddaughter and my grandson, who is 12 and 9 years of age, and these vaccines being offered to them, I felt as a grandmother I had to do a bit more research, had to find out a bit more about these vaccines, how they're affecting people. So I started writing Freedom of Information requests. And I wrote to the MHRA, which is the Medicines Health Regulatory Agency, which is our governing body in the UK that is supposed to manage vaccines. It's supposed to manage medicine in general, and any side effects and any damage those medicines are causing. And I asked them two questions. I asked them, in Northern Ireland, how many people have died from the COVID-19 vaccine? And asked them how many people in Northern Ireland have been injured from the COVID-19 vaccine. The first response I got back was in August 2021. And at that time, there was 27 suspected deaths in Northern Ireland and 4,755 adverse reactions to the vaccines. I then did a parallel Freedom of Information request to the Department of Health, and I wanted to know how many children in Northern Ireland had passed away from COVID. And I got a response back from them, and this was slightly later. That Freedom of Information request came back in August. This was in February. The latest one that I got was in February 2022. And they told me the total number of people that had died from COVID was 5,161 people. And I asked them specifically how many of those people had at least one comorbidity or had underlying health issues. And what the media doesn't tell you is 4,894 of those people were not only elderly, but they had at least one comorbidity. And when I say a comorbidity, it could have been stage 4 cancer, it could have been severe diabetes, it could have been kidney problems, it could have been heart issues, it could have been just obesity in itself. So there was underlying health issues, and only 267 people have died from COVID in Northern Ireland, just COVID alone, 267 people over a 3-year period. So I asked them to clarify that and to break it down to age group. And the youngest person in Northern Ireland to die from COVID was 38 years of age. So when I found that information out, and I found out the adverse reactions to the vaccines, I said there was no way that my granddaughter or my grandson was going to get the vaccine because COVID didn't affect them, but the vaccines could. So in September of 2022, I've basically done it in August, then September the following year, and I'm going to be doing it this September again, just to get the updated figures. But in September 2022, I asked the same questions. How many people in Northern Ireland had died from the COVID vaccines, and how many people were seriously injured? So please remember the numbers I said to you about COVID, how many people had died from COVID, because it all sort of correlates. And they came back to me and they said to me there was 48 people in Northern Ireland that had been suspected deaths from the COVID vaccines, and in total 6,510 adverse reactions. They actually then split that into two figures, and I asked them, how, of those ones that have been seriously injured, of those ones who have been injured by the COVID vaccines and the adverse reactions, how many of them were seriously injured? And the total number is 4,956. That means that there's 4,956 people out there that need our help in Northern Ireland. There's also possibly 48 families that have suffered bereavement that need our help. And hopefully with today's event and with the speeches, those people that have been injured and those people who have been bereaved will actually come forward and seek our assistance, and we will endeavour to help them as best as we possibly can. So I then wrote to Mr. McBride, our Chief Medical Officer, and to the Department of Health, and I gave them the Freedom of Information response that I got back from the MHRA, showing the deaths and showing the vaccine injuries. And I wanted to know from them what they were going to be doing in the media, in literature. In other words, were they going to be putting out a day like today? Were they going to announce this to the public? Were they going to tell the public that there has been suspected deaths from the vaccines, that there has been such a huge amount of serious adverse reactions? And I'm going to read just a paragraph from each response. By the way, all this information I think will be going up onto our website. So if anybody wants to see the Freedom of Information requests or wants to see the responses that I got back from Peter May and that I got back from Michael McBride, you'll be able to access it onto our website. But just going to quote a paragraph from each one. This is from Mr. Michael McBride, our Chief Medical Officer. Some events may happen anyway, regardless of vaccination. This is particularly the case when millions of people are vaccinated, and especially when vaccines are being given to the most elderly people and people having underlying health issues. So basically, what he's saying is the people the figures that are coming back from the MHRA are mainly elderly with underlying health issues. I then got the response back from Peter May, who happens to be our permanent secretary and the health and the HSC chief executive of Northern Ireland, Health and Social Care. And he says the same thing. The MHRA explained a high proportion of people vaccinated early in the vaccination campaign were very elderly and or had pre-existing medical conditions. Older age and chronically underlying illnesses make it more likely that coincidental adverse events will occur. So he too is basically saying that the people that have been vaccine damaged or have died have been elderly with underlying health issues. Now, remember I said to you, please remember the figures from COVID, the people that died from COVID. The 4,894 people that had died from COVID were elderly and had underlying health issues. Again, I'm going to reiterate, there was only 267 people, healthy people in Northern Ireland that died from COVID. So their argument, in actual fact, relates more to the COVID deaths than it does to the vaccine deaths. And when I sent through the Freedom of Information response to them, there was if I can find it just to show you. That's what it looked like. Don't know if Shane can get that on camera. But not only sending me back the figures of who had died and who was seriously injured, they actually categorized it by vaccine and then by age. And the majority of people that have actually reported adverse reactions to the MHRA, I'm going to give you the age categories, 0 to 19, 143 people have reported adverse reactions. So it could be a non-serious reaction, it could be a serious reaction, or it could be a death. Between the ages of 20 to 59, 4,499 people have reported adverse reactions. Between the ages of 60 to 79, 737 people have reported injuries, or family members have reported a death. Now remember what Michael McBride and Mr. May had to say, that it was the elderly and underlying health issues. From our own government authority agency that's supposed to be regulating this, only 120 people were 80 years plus. So their argument and their response back to me that it was the elderly that have been reporting the adverse injuries and deaths is totally inaccurate. They didn't even bother to actually look at the Excel spreadsheet that had the injuries actually categorized by vaccine and by age group. Because had they looked at that, they would have actually seen it wasn't the elderly only reporting their adverse reactions. In fact, the main group that have reported 4,499 adverse reactions is actually between the ages of 20 to 59. So this is my second part of why I've joined this group. And I feel that it is vitally important for these numbers to get out, because in my opinion, there is over 4,000, and possibly even now, possibly the figures have gone up compared to what I had back in September 2020, where there could be well over 5,000 people that have been seriously injured, and so many families that have been bereaved, and they need our help. And I think that is what today is all about. So you people sitting here in front of me, you're not alone. And everybody who sees this video, you're not alone. That's what VIBS and I is all about. Thank you very much. We're learning. This is my wonderful friend Jonathan, and he's going to speak more.
Thank you, Kathy, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'd like to also extend a welcome to everyone and just say my personal thanks to everyone on the team. Working together the last little while has been amazing, and I'll be supporting Darren and everyone in trying to create a support network where we can support people who have been injured or bereaved. And in this little talk I want to give, very briefly, I want to think about the importance of hearing and listening to the whistleblower, and why this is such an important theme for us to consider when it comes to those who have been affected by this issue, the injured and bereaved. Before I do that, I just briefly want to give an introduction to what I've been involved with the last couple of years, which really was from about 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago. Even at the inception, when I first saw the idea of rolling out a new type of vaccine to the population, I was very concerned at seeing how critical voices who were sounding the alarm bell at that stage, even in late 2020, early 2021, experts in areas like immunology, from the vaccine industry itself, molecular biology, understanding how the body reacts to different environmental settings, and also toxicologists, so people who understand the effect that injection of certain ingredients could have potentially. I actually had the opportunity to get to know some of these folks, even people who were CEOs of small pharmaceutical research companies who have publicly been sounding the alarm, both in England and in America as well. And seeing how their voice was suppressed and silenced caused me great alarm. And that was really, for me, the first red flag when it came to this vaccine rollout. that caused me to take a very deep dive. And to that end, I spent quite considerable time and effort putting together a website and writing reports, articles, issuing freedom of information requests, creating videos, doing presentations. And my experience, perhaps like some people here today, is also being silenced as well and being banned from social media, taken off LinkedIn permanently, can't get that account back ever. It's a permanent suspension, suspended from Twitter for 8 months. All my full-length presentations removed from YouTube, and then obviously constant bans and deprioritization on Facebook. I'm only mentioning that to explain that my motivation isn't to give sort of theories that come off the top of my head. It's actually just to speak for the silenced voices of the experts, of the whistleblowers that I'll mention in a moment, and of course the voice of the vaccine injured and bereaved. And yet doing that can lead to the content being removed from social media. So this is a very important thing to consider. And then professionally, my background is cybersecurity. So with that comes a critical mindset and an understanding that when a product is marketed through the media, through the government, through the official channels, those stakeholders, for whatever reason, are not totally independent and impartial stakeholders. We've heard about the MHRA already, the medical regulator. Well, they should be totally impartial and shouldn't have any biases. But we know that 86% of their funding comes directly from the pharmaceutical industry. So is that really an independent voice in this matter? Is it an adjudicator for medical safety as it should be? Can that explain some of the problems that we're seeing? And of course, the pharmaceutical companies themselves are private enterprises. They have stakeholders, they have shareholders that they have to make a return for. They are ultimately making profit. Now, it doesn't mean that every product they ever make doesn't have a medical benefit in some occasions. But what is required from the medical regulator, from the government, and at this stage it falls down to citizen researchers and concerned citizens, is to sound the alarm if we have regulatory capture and we have regulators that are not properly doing their job. And principally we're thinking about the real world safety data. And everyone in this room who has a story of a vaccine injury or bereavement represents a real world data point that should be taken incredibly seriously for a medical product that's only been rolled out in the last few years using novel technology. It should be viewed with the utmost suspicion. The MHRA should be making it so easy for you to tell your story. Society should be making it so easy for you to tell your story. If that's not happening, something's gone badly wrong. And I'm about to give an example from only less than 20 years ago of this very same paradigm, and I will give you real statistics that everyone accepts, even in the mainstream media, about how serious this problem can be. So I want to say that the foundation of medical ethics is first, do no harm. This is a very important principle for us to keep in mind as we think about the COVID vaccines. And the importance of not only hearing, but listening to the whistleblower. And I ask you the question, is the whistleblower always believed the first time? Think about any scandal in history in the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years of any type where you have a whistleblower. Are they believed the first time? Are they understood, revered by society, celebrated and extolled straight away? Maybe 50 years later a film comes out and does celebrate them, but at the time, does it or does it not? Are they disbelieved, ignored, shunned or slandered? Is this the experience of the vaccine injured and bereaved today? Now I want to think briefly about the COVID-19 clinical trials. I want to focus on Pfizer's trial for the Pfizer-BioNTech drug or vaccine. So there was a girl in the adolescent trial named Maddie de Garay who was a healthy child, very active, had lots of energy. After her second dose in January 2021, she immediately felt pain at the injection site, and she describes it as feeling like her heart was going to come out from her chest. She suffered very severe and devastating physical injuries. She's now wheelchair bound. She uses a nasogastric tube. So devastating mobility issues, devastating gastrointestinal injuries, 12 years old at the time. However, in the report, which Pfizer write up basically in the New England Journal of Medicine, which summarizes the clinical trial, the actual very raw patient level data is not actually released to our medical regulators. It's written up in these summary documents, some of which are released to the public. So a few months later, the 15th of July 2021, Pfizer's clinical trial report claimed there were no vaccine-related serious adverse events. So none of them, they say, were vaccine-related. They can discount all of them. But the same summer, Maddie de Garay is on video at Senator Ron Johnson's conference in a wheelchair with a nasogastric tube. So how are we seeing reports that don't align to reality? One of the medical reports when she went to the hospital said suspected adverse reaction, and the family still have that. There was another boy in the same trial who was actually originally in the placebo group, and then he crossed over and took the treatment drug, the vaccine. He was 15 years old, then he turned 16, and they were able to give him the drug under the EUA for the adult dose, or the adult EUA. And he suffered myopericarditis. That's myocarditis, inflammation of the myocardium around the heart, and pericarditis, inflammation of the fluid-filled sac around the heart. He got both of them. It records in a document of the FDA dated 26th of October that a cardiologist advised him to undertake limited activity after 2 months. The trial investigator and the FDA both agreed it was related with reasonable possibility, a suspected adverse reaction. There were about something over 2,000 people in the adolescent trial. We only know for sure of 1,080 of those adolescents that definitely took the drug from both the treatment group and the placebo group who crossed over. So between 1,080 up to a maximum of 2,000. 2 of those children, 1 girl, 1 boy, suffered devastating injuries. Does every parent hear about that when the offer was made in the schools for adolescents to take the COVID vaccine? The very same dose, same strength. There's another whistleblower, a very determined man who sent me all of his documents all the way from Argentina through email, Augusto Ru. He's a lawyer from Argentina. He was also in the Pfizer trial. He had to sue, he had to fight very hard to get all of his medical notes from the time of the clinical trial. He received a second dose of the Pfizer vaccine 9th of September 2020. 3 days later, he admitted to hospital with chest pains. He has a CT scan taken showing laminar pericardial effusion, so too much fluid in the pericardium, pericarditis. He also has a note, his exit note from the hospital under Dr. Destilio, a senior doctor, saying, it's in Spanish, but the translation says, adverse reaction to coronavirus vaccine, high probability. That's a suspected adverse reaction. But his clinical trial records, which were released fairly recently under Freedom of Information request, ignore the real cause of his hospitalization, and it cites suspected COVID-19 illness and anxiety, because he'd previously had psychological problems. So, once again, his data is missing in all of the official records of the clinical trial. So we now have a problem with data integrity. We can see that what has been written up about these clinical trials doesn't accord to reality. My question is this: if the COVID-19 vaccine rollout is an exercise in genuine public health risk management, why is so little attention given to adverse reactions some people have suffered? And given the fact I've just mentioned, that adverse events were suppressed during the clinical trials, surely it's completely inevitable, sadly, that we would see so many injuries as we have seen when it's rolled out to the whole population. There's also a whistleblower named Brooke Jackson, who is called the FDA whistleblower hotline in September 2020. She has a legal case against Pfizer, and she's recorded so many instances of clinical trial protocols not being followed and of other anomalies that do not make sense in her experience. She was a senior lead with Ventavia, one of the research groups that works with Pfizer. So we have a whistleblower willing to testify already. But there's a precedent. I want to briefly cover this. There was a drug a few years ago called Vioxx. It was a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug to treat inflammation and pain. In January 1999, Merck launched a study. It was their drug. And they launched a safety study called the Vioxx Gastrointestinal Outcomes Research Study, VIGOR. FDA approved Vioxx in May 1999. But it was known to Merck in late 1999 from their own internal data. They had their own DSMB, that's the Data and Safety Monitoring Board. They identified the risk of serious heart problems being double that of a competitor drug called naproxen. However, this data wasn't fairly disclosed when they wrote it up in the very same journal that Pfizer wrote up their trial report in, New England Journal of Medicine. It later transpired that they had withheld key data, and the New England Journal of Medicine editor-in-chief later said that the authors of the Merck safety study, the VIGOR study, withheld critical data on the cardiovascular toxicity of Merck's drug VIBS. 1 year before the drug was pulled, VIBS had sales and revenues of $2.5 billion. So it was a very profitable drug. Merck voluntarily withdrew it from the market in 2004. You might ask the question, well, how did the drug get pulled? Well, there was basically a very determined person, an epidemiologist called Dr. David Graham, who conducted a study on VIBS. And he proved, and this is all accepted in all mainstream publications, you can read articles on this from Forbes and all kinds of mainstream publications, it's even on Wikipedia, 88,000 to 139,000 heart attacks with a 30 to 40% fatality rate, resulting in probable 30,000 to 55,000 deaths. It's mainstream, that's within the last 20 years, published in The Lancet. And the FDA tried to suppress his findings. But I thought they were supposed to be an independent medical regulator like the MHRA. Same problem. It received funding from the pharmaceutical industry. Dr. David Graham described it as the worst public health disaster in history. Dr. David Graham learned that his study would be swept under the carpet, so he needed help. What did he do? He contacted a group called the Government Accountability Project, which supports whistleblowers. It's actually used by high-profile clients, even from the national security community. The reason I mention that is that's actually the stakes of what we're dealing with here. When you have a problem of this scale, it's basically an issue, I see it as, with whistleblowers. And whistleblowers and people who are telling the truth when all kinds of stakeholders don't want them to, deserve and require our support. And that's what I would like to do as part of this group. I'd like to offer support because I've seen silenced voices. Academics and researchers have been silenced from the very beginning. Adverse reactions from the COVID-19 vaccine trials, those adverse reactions have been suppressed or written out of trial records. And finally today, the voice of the vaccine injured and bereaved is also suppressed. So now I want to work with everyone at VIBS and I, and to work with everyone here to help everyone here who's been affected by this issue to find your voice. Because we should create a supportive environment, and I'd like to work with everyone to campaign with you and alongside you, because I believe that your voice and the voice of the vaccine injured and bereaved is powerful and it can affect change, and we should all support it. And finally, as is our slogan, and we have it on some of our literature, you are not alone, because we're here to create a support network. So thank you for that. And I'd like to now hand over to Ken and Sharon for very important...
Just before, we hand the word to Sharon and Ken. Kath just needs 2 more minutes, if that's okay.
Okay, Kathy instead. Thank you.
Sorry, I asked to speak once again, just quickly after what Jonathan has mentioned. The 48 suspected deaths in Northern Ireland that came from the MHRA, I knew that I would be getting a lot of criticism on the fact that the 48 deaths haven't been proven causation, right? They're suspected deaths. And I just wanted to let everybody know that I actually wrote to the PSNI of Northern Ireland, and also when writing to the MHRA, I asked them who investigates that figure, that 48 deaths plus. And the MHRA came back to me and the PSNI and said it's actually the Northern Ireland Coroner's Office that investigates those deaths. So I wrote to the Northern Ireland Coroner and I asked them how many investigations have they done and completed, how many investigations are they currently doing, and how many investigations do they have to get to. So they came back to me and they said to me that they had done 3 investigations and 3 deaths in Northern Ireland have been confirmed that it has been the vaccine that has caused the death, and it's actually the vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine, that's on the death certificate. And I just wanted to let people know that the first person was a male who was 90 years of age. He actually died from the vaccine in January, between January and March 2021. So right at the very beginning of the rollout, there was 1 death from the vaccines in Northern Ireland. Now, as far as I know, when you've been offered these vaccines, you're supposed to be given all the truth. And as they say in court, nothing but the truth. So was anybody who was vaccinated here today, were you told that there was 1 death and X amount of serious injuries to the vaccine when you got your vaccine? In July to September 2022, there was another death in Northern Ireland from the vaccines, and it was a female, and she was aged between 15 and 34 years of age. And then in January to March of 2023, there was another female who died, and it's on the death certificate, between the age of 65 and 74. So there's been 3 deaths that have been confirmed by the Northern Ireland Coroner's Office. And they would not give me how many investigations they're still currently working on or how many they still have to get to me, because they open investigations and I'm not entitled to that information. But I'm not going to stop. I'll be like a pit bull with a bone, and I will not let go. Again, thank you. Just want to let you know that. And I shall introduce my lovely Ken and Sharon, and they're going to explain their story to you.
So I'm Kenneth, and this is my lovely wife Sharon. You've had the professionals, and now you've got the amateurs. I'm sorry about that. So just to give you a little bit about our background, we are going to tell you a little bit about our family's story through this, and you may be able to relate to that. It may be helpful. My background is engineering, but my wife's is nursing. She's retired from nursing now. We used to be a family of 5, but since February last year, we're now a family of 4. We've 2 grown boys, and we lost our daughter Ruth, aged 23, on the 8th of February 2022. She died suddenly in her apartment following what at the time she thought was just the flu. And this is our story.
March 2020. The lockdowns first came in response to this, what we were told was a novel coronavirus. And I knew something was wrong, something was badly off. By the early summer, I was tapping into Dr. Mike Yeadon, and he has a history of previously working for Pfizer, and he's a known expert in his field, and I know Jonathan has made reference to a number of experts, immunologists, and high-up CEOs in pharmaceuticals that were raising the alarm but were being censored, were being shut down. So I knew straight away when I was listening to him and he was speaking sense. There was also the White Coat Summit, which went viral very, very quickly on YouTube, and that came from America. A group of doctors, about 20 or so doctors, started to speak out, and again it was censored within, I don't know, was it hours or days, I can't quite remember. But they were speaking a whole lot of sense, and you knew straight away something's up when these sensible voices are being censored. And they were also risking a significant thing to be speaking out in public as well. So later that summer, mainstream media across the board ran a wall-to-wall story that COVID immunity was temporary, that antibodies waned, and that folk could get COVID more than twice. I knew straight away we're being lied to here, because that is not how our immune system works. And at exactly the same time, the talk of vaccines really, really ramped up, and everybody was feeling the pressure, because we were being told over and over and over again, nothing goes back to normal until everybody is vaccinated. So the following summer, in 2021, it's about 6 months or so, I think, after the vaccines first arrived in the UK, our eldest son was planning a trip with some friends to the Republic of Ireland. Now, most venues at that time actually required a vax pass, including restaurants, and our son was unvaccinated, and he was under intense pressure from his friends to get vaccinated for this trip. I phoned the GP on our son's behalf to ask, for confirmation of COVID immunity through a blood test which could confirm what we call T cell immunity. Now that is how your immune system works, because the T cell immunity shows that your immune system has, as it were, taken a photograph of the bug that has invaded your body. And even though the antibodies wane and disappear, your immune system still has that photograph. And then the next time that bug comes, your immune system springs into action, and before you even have symptoms, it's gone. That is how our immune system works. So I did ask the GP for this test because we had all had the COVID symptoms back in March. And I had also advised my GP that I had read around the subject, and I had read from a couple of different sources that there was a greater risk of adverse events if someone has taken the vaccine after they've already had COVID. The reply that I got was pretty astounding, and I'll just quote it for you. She said to me on the phone, "You're probably more well read on the subject than I am." And our request for that blood test was denied. Now, unknown to us, at the same time, our daughter was planning a trip to England to attend a music festival. And we all know, we've seen the pictures. I don't know if anybody here has seen the documentary Died Suddenly. And there's footage at the very, very end of that. And it's a music festival. And they are screaming from the stage, "Let's hear it for Pfizer, let's hear it for Moderna and AstraZeneca." We've seen those pictures. So she couldn't go to this music festival unless she was vaccinated. And so on the 7th of July, unbeknownst to us, she went to a pop-up clinic in Ballymena and she received a Pfizer injection. Now, months later, Ruth admitted to us what she had done. Obviously, as a family, over the months we've been discussing this, and we as parents were begging our children not to give in to the pressure and not to take this experimental injection. But she admitted what she had done, but promised that she wasn't going to take any more. And she didn't take any more. By Christmas 2021, it was noticeable that our Ruth had lost a bit of weight. And the only other symptom she'd shared with me is that she'd had a dizzy spell one day. And we had the usual mother and daughter conversation about weight loss and eating right and fluids and that sort of thing. Into January 2022, and the track and trace app had been in full swing for some time, and folk were taking multiple COVID tests, lateral flows, PCRs, and they were quarantining left, right and centre. So Ruth's flatmate tested positive, and they were isolated in Ruth's apartment for upwards of 2 weeks. It was immediately after this period of time Ruth took ill with what she thought was the flu. By the time Ruth's flatmate raised the alarm, it was too late. And despite the best efforts of the emergency services at the scene, they worked on her for over an hour, but she was gone. I asked at the scene that it be recorded on Ruth's notes that she had taken a Pfizer injection months earlier. And I am very thankful to the police officer who made sure that that information was captured and it was recorded in the information, the history information at the beginning of Ruth's autopsy report. And we're so thankful to him for doing that. The initial autopsy couldn't find a cause for Ruth's death. She was fit, she was healthy, she was 23 years old. We waited 8 months for the full report to come through. And if I could just say something in regard to that, cast your mind back to the media and the ticker along the bottom of the screen, COVID deaths, COVID deaths. How were they able to do that if it takes 8 months to get a result back from the coroner's office of a death? How were they able to do that? We have to ask ourselves these questions. We have to rethink everything that we once thought about the National Health Service and about our own government and how they look at all this and how they manage these risks. October 22, the coroner's report came, and we were told that the cause of Ruth's death was Addison's disease. Now, Addison's disease can be secondary to other conditions, but in Ruth's case, it was an autoimmune condition. She was positive. She had positive Addison's antibodies in her bloodstream. Again, a direct quote from the coroner's report: Ruth's adrenal glands were destroyed. So I began to read around Addison's disease, and I quickly found out that without the presence of another influencing factor, Ruth's history was not a good fit. Addison's disease is typically slow and chronic in its progression, and it can take anything from 1 to 4 or even 5 years before someone can get a diagnosis. Ruth went from onset of symptoms to death in somewhere between 3 and 6 months. She falls outside the typical age bracket for Addison's disease, and Ruth was previously fit and healthy. We asked for a full copy of the coroner's report, and we're glad to say that we were able to get that. And although it was a very thorough report, yet there was no reference to or acknowledgement of the fact that Ruth had received a Pfizer vaccine 7 months before. We also never were given an opportunity to speak directly with the coroner at any time. Immediately after receipt of this report, we did raise a question through the administrator via an email about a blood test which had been taken 1 week before Ruth's death. And we got a written reply which confirmed the blood test and confirmed the results. And in that same written reply, we were told that the case was now closed, and if we had any further questions, we would go back to our GP. So we made an appointment with our GP, and in November, we met with her just to express our concerns and to state our position that we believed that the Pfizer injection was at the very, very least implicated in Ruth's death. 3 things came out of that visit. Firstly, our doctor expressed concern and surprise that we had never had a direct conversation with the coroner herself. Secondly, she did advise us to fill in a yellow card report on behalf of Ruth, which both our doctor and myself did in January of 23. And thirdly, she suggested that we email the coroner's office and raise our concerns in writing. I want to say that we are very, very grateful and thankful for the support that our GP gave us at that time, because we were not expecting that at all. We were expecting some pushback, and she was very, very good with us and very kind. So on the 4th of January, we did what she advised. We emailed the coroner's office to ask, and it was really a simple question: why they had a sample of the adrenal tissue, why had they not tested it for the presence of spike protein when they saw that Ruth had received the vaccine 7 months before? To this date, we have no reply from the coroner's office. The truth is, while we don't have absolute proof that the Pfizer injection was the cause of Ruth's death, yet it's clear that all the evidence points in that direction. And quite frankly, the silence of the coroner on the matter speaks volumes. Don't need to read it. We know that we're not alone. There are more folk who, like ourselves, have suffered injury or bereavement following these injections. You might not have absolute proof, but you know enough to recognise the link and follow the evidence yourselves. You do not need affirmation from your GP, even your family or your friends, because that doesn't change the truth. The truth is absolute, and the truth will come out.
I joined this group Well, really, firstly, to be a support to my wife. I'm doing a great job today. Sharon is a carer, worked in that industry, and we want to be there to help others. We're simple people, but we know and love the God of the Bible, and that God is a God of truth. We don't have all the answers, and we probably won't get all the answers, but God knows the truth, and that's okay. It doesn't mean we sit around and do nothing. We as a family, we were very privileged that both our families rallied around and have helped us through this. Our church has helped us. And I guess we want to speak here today. We want to speak the truth. We've tried not to embellish the story, or this is just how it happened, and these are the facts as we have discovered them, and we're just sharing that with everyone here today. Again, as everyone's been said, a recognition that this has went on, a recognition that there are those out there that are hurting, and if we can be of any help or support, we open our home, and we would love to spend time to get to know each one of you here today. So that's why Sharon and I are part of VIBS NI. We're the newbies of the team, and it has been a pleasure to get to know each member of the team.
Yeah.
There are plenty of people that have been shunned and scared into silence, and this is wrong. So that is why we've chosen to come forward and to speak the truth and stand here today. This is not normal for us to stand in front of a mic, as you can tell, but we're glad to be able to do that, and I hope in some way that would be helpful. And thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was powerful. It's also the reason why. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. It's also the reason why we do what we do, and we do it as volunteers. I have 2 children myself, and I don't think I could cope with losing one. So this is what gives us the heart and the determination to do what we do. Sorry. So I just need to remind people once again that if it's triggered anyone and you need some professional help, there is help here. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is, before I just hand over for some questions to the team, said a lot of people took the job because they were coerced into it, and we have an issue with the digital passports as well. So no one should have been coerced in to taking any medical treatment. And part of what we will be doing, and part of what I will be doing in the policy with regards to Stormont, is I'll be ensuring that does not happen again, because we can't have this again. Okay. So I'm going to put the microphone onto the table, and if anyone's any questions, we're going to break at 2 o'clock for 30 minutes, okay? So if anyone's any questions, raise your hand and we'll attempt to answer them for you.
I would suggest to Sharon and Ken, contact the chief pathologist directly, because it's the coroner is the legal officer who orders the post-mortem. But the post-mortem is done by the pathology department, which is based in the Royal Victoria Hospital. the chief pathologist, going back a number of years, was Professor Jack Crane. And I remember when COVID started, I looked him up. He was still alive then. And I just regret not contacting him, because when I looked up his information in, I think it was 2016, he had actually written a paper highlighting the fact that when he did postmortems on patients who'd been in nursing homes, he found a lot of the drug midazolam in their system. And he was querying that. Now that's the chief, he was Professor Jack Crane, the chief pathologist. As far as I know, I mean, poor man's dead now. And I've tried to find that information online and I can't, then I'm not very computer literate. So I would hope that maybe you could get help from the chief pathologist. And then the other thing, although this is going off on a slight tangent to what we've heard, we're talking about nursing homes, but the Department of Health actually put in a huge order, like 4 times as much as they're already having, which was obviously too much in 2016, to increase the amount of midazolam that they ordered to cover 2020 to 2024. I was in contact with some nurses in a nursing home who are afraid to speak out, but they were aware that they were having to give midazolam, and all the deaths that happened were called COVID deaths. I am also was in contact with the mother, who was a retired nurse, of a district nurse, and as a district nurse, she was going into nursing homes, and when patients died, she would report it to the doctor. The doctor wouldn't come near the patient who died, but he'd just tell the district nurse if any breathing difficulties at all, put it down as a COVID death. Well, everybody before they die has breathing difficulties, so, right. Thank you. What else are bringing up?
Just at the start, Darren, you mentioned that there were £120,000 for vaccine damages payment. It's the percentage we need to look at, the 60% damage, not how much. Money's nothing.
Yeah, I mean, at what point does 60% mean something if you're 58%? So this is something that will be addressed. It's one of the main focus points for ourselves to lobby at Stormont. That really decision is made across the water in London, Parliament, but we will have an input. And
there is other groups lobbying Parliament over there at the minute as well.
Yeah. So yeah, that's absolutely 100% is part of what we'll be doing. Thank you.
We are linked in with those other wee groups in the UK. Darren and Jonathan do a sterling job with that, so there is maximum collaboration going on, folks. This operation is going to be so efficient and so effective because we are joined up. We are joined up together everywhere. It's not just unique to Northern Ireland. Sorry. Thanks. Volunteer husband. He is my volunteer husband. It is not unique to us. We know that. We are not afraid to collaborate and we are not afraid to reach out to others. So please rest assured, we are all over this, folks.
Just to add to that, I mean, what difference does it make if somebody is 50% disabled from these vaccines? They don't get compensation. When somebody is 60% disabled from the vaccines, they get the compensation. No, if somebody is seriously injured, whether it's 20%, 30%, 40% or 50%, they also need help from our government. End of.
Just like, I suppose, everybody else, I felt pushed into getting the vaccine. My mum didn't want me to get it. My mum was very aware of everything that was going on, and it got to the point where we actually started to think she was crazy. But I got the vaccine. I got 2 vaccines, which I regretted, and 5 days after I took Bell's palsy. I was rushed into resus with a team of stroke doctors around me. I had to get a brain scan, and I was on medication straight away. Then I took shingles 3 times. This is all from last May. I've had shingles 3 times. I've had numerous infections. I have suffered from a sinus infection from February. I have high blood pressure now, and I also took a blood clot. So, to be honest, it has ruined my life. Not only my life, my family's life, and my wee child. My 9-year-old child said to me yesterday, he was crying, he's taking panic attacks, and said, "Mummy, I'm worrying about you after that vaccine." A 9-year-old shouldn't have to go through with that. It's affected everybody in my family, not just me. So.
Thank you for being
Thanks
so
very
brave
much.
and sharing that. Thank you. Let me just go to the back of the room.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Aidan, and I'm from Toombridge. I was one of the few people that didn't get the vaccine, but that doesn't mean that I haven't been injured by the vaccine. I'm from a family of 4, and I was all of my siblings have had at least some form of medical mishap condition when we were much younger. My younger brother had asthma, which I still believe was from the vaccine. My sister, whenever she was younger, my older sister, she had really, really bad health complications. Like her face was really swollen. And I was special needs. I had what was called glue ear, which essentially is like dyslexia for people with hearing problems. So whenever someone would have spoke to me, I would have misinterpreted what they said, and that put me into special needs. Also, when I was 14, whatever vaccine it was, because they don't tell you all these things properly, I got whatever the vaccine was for 14-year-olds. And then 2 years later, I fainted in assembly. And although I can't confirm if it was caused by the vaccine, and some of these vaccine incidents we can't prove, I still feel that it was, because it's not normal at the time for a 16-year-old to faint in assembly. And I just want to comment on about your daughter's, about her story. I want to say thank you for telling that, because it is real. You are real. Your daughter was a real person who's sadly not with us. And there's people out there that dare, the sheer audacity to say that's not real. And I would say to them, how do you know that? Why don't you go to these people face to face and say to them? So I just want to say to you, thank you so much, because that really moved me. And I just want to ask a question in terms of merchandise, because I see you're wearing all your stuff. Would that be available for us to wear? Because I believe if we really, really, really do care, we're not just here just to virtue signal, just to say, oh, I care, I stand for the vaccine injured and bereaved. If we really do, because we are in a public space, we're in Belfast city centre, in the Europa, we are publicly advertising, or yous are, that this is the vaccine injured. And we obviously know there are people out there, like my younger brother, who are incredibly vaccine zealous and will deny anything that you say. So if you did have a merchandise, I would proudly wear it, and I think we all should too. So thank you.
Thanks very much for your input, Aidan. Yeah, look, we will be looking at some form of funding going forward, so we will announce that at some other point on the Facebook page and website. So look, it's 2:00. Is there anyone else who wants to ask a question before we break for tea?
1 wee second, I'm going to the other side of the room. That's the camera.
Hi, I was vaccine injured back in 2021 March. What I want to feed back is, on behalf of being vaccine injured and probably on behalf of everyone else who's vaccine injured, regarding will you be lobbying or campaigning for a clinical pathway here in Northern Ireland so that we can receive treatment, we can be monitored. COVID clinics don't accept a lot of vaccine injured referrals. So that's very important to me, and I know to others that there will be a vaccine injury clinic for people to get treatment and researched and monitored.
Look, thanks again for that. We do have a sheet that everyone should have there, and there's a comment box. So if there's anything that you would like us to do or feel it needs attention, please pop your comments into into the comment box there, and yes, we'll have a look at that. Thanks very much. So at that stage, we're going to break at 2 o'clock. Well, 2 o'clock now for tea break, and we'll be back at 2:30.
Can I also just say that straight after the break, we're going to hear from Debbie and Maliki. And again, I commend your bravery, and I'm so proud of you, and I'm so proud of your mommy. So if everybody could come back after the break, you're going to hear another horrifying story. Unfortunately, as I discussed with you earlier on, the reports that have come back from the MHRA, the regulatory body that governs all medicines in the UK, only 1%, between 1 and 3% vaccine injured actually gets reported. So remember the numbers that I read out to you, that there was 4,499 people from the ages of 20 to 59 that were injured. I mean, that number could basically be not doubled, not tripled, not quadrupled, but 90 times higher. There is 3 families that we know from the coroner's office that are suffering bereavement because those 3 deaths have been confirmed. But there's over 5,000 people in Northern Ireland with serious adverse injuries, and that figure could be, like I said, 10 times higher. So we'll see you all after the break. Thank you.
So just in the next segment, before I hand back to Kathy, because I want Kathy to introduce the next speakers. Again, thanks very much for coming today, and I'll repeat again, if anyone needs to speak to a professional, there is someone available here. So I'll now pass over to Kathy, and then she'll make the next introduction to the speakers.
Thank you. I asked to say a few words just quickly before Debbie comes up to speak, and just to let you know that how I found out about Debbie and Maliki, Teresa's daughter and her husband, was Maliki actually got hold of the Stephen Nolan show, and he was trying to explain what had happened to his wife on the Stephen Nolan show, and Stephen Nolan actually very rudely, very abruptly cut Maliki off. He did state before he cut him off that he was going to speak to the Department of Health and get their side on what happened to Teresa, and do a little bit of investigating journalism work, and he would get back to Maliki. So has Stephen Nolan ever contacted you, Maliki? No. So this is our mainstream media, as supposed to be as professional journalism. If they're going to make a comment on the public radio that they're going to investigate something and come back to a person, they don't bother. This is why we've also had to have Shane film in today, because we know that the truth will be put out, even if it's just through social media at the very, very beginning, and mainstream media won't be able to ignore it. So, like I said earlier on, what has happened to Teresa is horrendous, and I'd like to give Debbie a warm welcome to come up and tell your story, Debbie.
Hi everyone. I'd like to say thank you to Kathy for inviting us here today. It's been a long journey. Please forgive me because I'm very nervous. On Friday the 22nd of January, Mummy went for her dialysis. She was on dialysis for about 2 years before that. Her dialysis had went down. She was going Monday, Wednesday and Friday, but she was doing so well on dialysis. She was then put down to 1 day. Yeah, she was on the dialysis, so she got a new lease of life. She was feeling great. She loved getting away in the camper, going to the beach, her and my dad together. Sorry, I'm struggling here a bit. moving back to the 22nd of January after Mummy had her dialysis treatment, the nurse gave her a brown envelope with a form inside for her to take home over the weekend to decide whether she wanted to take the vaccine or not. Mummy had said to us that she didn't want it. We had all said to Mummy also that we didn't want her to take it. She went back on the Monday morning, the 25th of January. Mummy took the form with her and said she didn't want it. The nurse had said to Mummy if she didn't take the vaccine, it may affect her from getting her treatment. So Mum then thought she didn't want to not be able to get the dialysis, so she took the vaccine there and then. She got the vaccine, got her dialysis treatment. Mum then started walking out to the car. Daddy was sitting in the car park waiting for her. She got into the car, feeling very tired, and Daddy also knew there was something wrong. He asked her what was wrong. She said she had got the vaccine, and we were all gutted. They came down to my house that day, and I knew just by looking at Mummy that there was something wrong. She looked very pale and very sick. Obviously, she told me she had taken the vaccine. So then they left and went back home. Oh, I don't know how I'm going to do this. They left and went back home. Mummy went to bed where she was feeling very sick. That evening she started to vomit and diarrhoea. She couldn't get out of bed. The same thing happened on the Tuesday morning. She was vomiting blood, and obviously her diarrhoea had blood in it as well. The Wednesday morning, the 27th, my dad called me and said he thinks that Mummy was taking a stroke. I went straight down the road. When I went into the house and seen Mum, her mouth was all twisted and her tongue was in spasm. We phoned for an ambulance. It took the ambulance about an hour for her to get there. Mum headed off to the hospital in the ambulance. Before that, the paramedics, I had said that she had got her vaccine on the Monday, and he said straight away that it wouldn't be nothing to do with the vaccine. She headed off to the hospital at 11:30. For the rest of the day, she sat in the corridor on a trolley by herself with her mouth still twisted and her tongue in spasm and her whole body in a full body shake. Mum had to wait all them hours for a COVID test to come back clear. At 8 p.m. that evening, Mummy phoned me to say to come and collect her. We went up and collected her from the hospital after the doctor said that it was a reaction from the vaccine and for her not to get another COVID vaccine because it would kill her. We took Mum home. We had to help her into the car first. We took her home and she went straight back to bed. She was very ill. She couldn't eat. She was constantly vomiting blood and diarrhoea. It was very hard for us as a family to watch. Mummy just lay in bed, fading away. She then ended up back in hospital again. This all happened within 4 weeks of her taking the vaccine. She had so many things wrong with her. The doctors couldn't tell us what was wrong with her. She took an infection in the bowel that spread over the bowel wall into her bloodstream. Very shaky. She was taking palpitations in her heart. She ended up in a bed with a diaper on. She couldn't eat or drink. She was constantly vomiting blood. And also with the diarrhea, it was constant blood coming out of her. They did say that they would put a feeding tube in. They put a feeding tube in 3 days before Mummy passed away. With all of that happened, within 4 weeks, Mummy had lost up on 5.5, 6 stone. Obviously, we haven't had any answers to this. The morning that Mummy was passing away, the day before that, on the Thursday, she was in the hospital and they phoned us to say that we could come up and see Mum, as they had to take her down for the camera test to see why her stomach was bleeding so bad. They took her down and she had a bust ulcer in her stomach. Her spleen was busted and the whole lining of her stomach was bleeding. She was bleeding from everywhere. It was like razor blades pumped into her body. We were able to stay there that night only because we fought to stay there, to stay with Mum. Mum had so many morphine injections pumped into her that it still didn't take away the pain. Myself and my family took the camper up to stay in the car park that night so that we could all take turns. There was only myself, my dad and my 2 brothers that were allowed in to see her. Daddy felt unwell that morning about 6 o'clock and he said he needed to go home to lie down. So he went off home with my brother. Myself and my children and my partner stayed. And I said to the wee nurse that I was going down to the camper to put my head down for an hour to give me a ring if anything happened. I phoned in at 8:30 and asked how Mummy was doing, and they said they needed me up the stairs right away as Mummy was taking her last breaths. They couldn't even phone me to tell me. So myself and my son run up the stairs to be with Mummy. But first, we had to wait about 10 minutes to get our PPE gear on from head to toe. They wouldn't let my son in either, but I took him by the hand and I pulled him in with me. As we entered, Mummy had took her last 3 breaths. There is more to that story, but unfortunately, I'm just very nervous and I have forgotten most of it.
Debbie, you have done absolutely brilliantly on the ones Kristen. Well done, my darling. Well done. You're a brave girl and your mommy will be proud looking down upon you.
Yeah.
I think what Debbie hadn't mentioned is that on 2 occasions that you had taken mommy to the A&E, it was both A&E doctors that actually confirmed this was vaccine damage. 2 A&E doctors that is vaccine damaged.
Yeah.
But your voice has been heard and Teresa's voice is speaking beyond the grave. And we will be seeking justice for this family and for Teresa. So,
Yeah. Thank you.
you're very welcome.
Thank you.
You're a lovely healer.
I'm just going into. Can everyone hear me?
That one's not working. That's for the.
Oh,
There you go.
everyone hear me now? These voices will no longer be silenced. And while VIBS and I are in existence, you'll be heard. And we will fight to make sure that you're heard. And as I said before, you're not alone. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass over to Paul Few. So I'll let Paul come to and make a speech.
Hello folks, thank you very much for coming here today. It's been a tremendous turnout for this group, VIBS NI, who has been launched today to give you guys a voice. Can I just thank Ken and Sharon, who I've come to know very well, and for Debbie and her father for telling their stories. But there are many people like Sharon and Ken and Debbie and her father. There are many people in this room who has been affected also. But the political world, or mainstream media, and in some cases, the medical professionals, say that you do not exist. And that's what we have to try and turn around. I have fought tirelessly, sometimes alone, in Stormont, to give you guys a voice. And I'm getting emotional, I don't know why, because I don't usually get emotional. But I have nothing but admiration for these people, because they've stepped up. They've stepped up. And the first appeal that I would make today is that we can't do it on our own. So if there's anyone out there with an inkling in their heart to come and volunteer for VIBS NI, please do it. The more, the better comes forward. Because we will not be quiet. We will not be silenced. And we will speak up. I'm in politics for many a reason. I'm a libertarian in my politics. Where I sit in the spectrum is libertarianism. So I was actually appalled at the very start about how government interfered in your life the way it did around lockdown philosophy and the real damage that lockdown philosophy did to our people. And we're still seeing the rollout of that hurt and pain today. And that will continue for decades. Our children disadvantaged at school, our people's mental health going through the roof, isolation and vulnerability, people being affected in many ways they never thought possible. And that's lockdown philosophy. So I fought, and I fought hard, and I questioned, which was my job. I questioned the science and the effectiveness around lockdown philosophy. And it scared me, it frightened me, the lack of accountability and the lack of scrutiny in our political class. And I questioned the whole integrity of our political system. If you're not into politics to help the most vulnerable, to give voice to the most needy, and to bring justice to people, then why are you in politics? And I knew rightly from the very start, even if I stood alone, and I wasn't alone, there were many behind me in the political class, that I had to do this. Because you cannot be silenced on something like this, something that caused so much harm. But then, of course, as lockdown philosophy was advanced and restrictions were imposed on you, then we were told that the vaccine was the game changer. We were told that this was the way out of lockdown philosophy. This was the way out. This was to get our freedoms back. Remember? And of course, like all politicians, it was good that medicine was available. It's good that medicine can be freely rolled out. And I have nothing, absolutely nothing. I'm not opposed to medication. I'm absolutely not opposed. And I actually would fight for someone's right to obtain a medication that's not available in this country. And on many occasions, and in many cases, I have fought for people who have rare conditions and who need support and medicine that's maybe available in America, but it's not available here. So you fight these campaigns for people. And those people sometimes are in a minority of one. There's maybe cases where a young child needs a medication because they have a rarest of rare a case or condition. Maybe only one in Northern Ireland. Maybe only 5 in Europe. Maybe only 100 in the world. But there's medicine available somewhere else for those people. And you would fight campaigns to help those people. And usually they get time on mainstream media. Usually there's interviews for this poor person, this child, or this adult who needs medication and can't get it. And usually the mainstream media are all over that. So why do these people in the political class, in the media, and in some cases in our medical profession, why do they strive to keep you guys quiet? And I've wondered about this question. And it's simply because they bought in. There's vested interest. It was the political class that imposed lockdown philosophy. It was the political class that promoted the medicine. And again, as I said, you can applaud the rollout and the slick operation, the military operation whereby a lot of people every hour, every day got jabbed. But early on, I was starting to see people come into my office who were vaccine injured. And I can remember one debate with a constituent who wanted to know why I wasn't promoting the vaccine the way other politicians were promoting the vaccine. Why I hadn't a picture up on my social media of my sleeve rolled up and me getting the injection. And I simply said because, well, medicine is very important. But people's consent is very important also. And I'm not comfortable with the way this is turning out, the way this language is changing. And here's how the language changed. First it was, this is the way out of lockdown, come and get your vaccine. It's available. Then it was, come and get your vaccine and you'll get free ice cream. Then it was, come and get your vaccine and get free food. Come and get your vaccine and you can attend this concert. But you won't be able to attend the concert if you don't get your vaccine. Then it was, come and get your vaccine, because if you don't, you're stupid. Then it was, come and get your vaccine, because if you don't, you're dangerous. You're dangerous to me, you're dangerous to your family, and you're dangerous to Granny. That's how the language changed. And I knew then states had crossed the Rubicon. How bad is it that a state that's there to protect people, the most vulnerable, uses the deployment of fear and then uses coercion for you then to get a medicine? But not only coercion, they then used discrimination. And I will play no part in that. I will have no truck with discrimination of any peoples in this country. But yet, most of the parties signed up for this. In fact, most were pushing for further discriminatory tactics and coercion tactics. And I couldn't believe it. If someone had said to me 10 years ago that this would happen in our country, I would have said, no way. No way would that happen. First of all, no government would dare to do it. Second of all, no peoples would let it happen. But what we have lived through the last 3 years has been horrendous. More so now for the people who have been affected and hurt, injured, bereaved and wronged. And it is our job, VIBS NI, to first of all tell these people in authority tell these people in media and tell these people in the medical world that you exist. Recognition is the first step to getting justice. We need to ensure that something like this could never happen again. But that's only part of the fight, because we also have to deal and pick up the pieces that you guys suffer every day by the effects of medicine. And I don't know why that's so controversial to have to say that, because with every medicine, there's side effects. In every single packet of medicine that you will pick up in your pharmacist or from the doctors, you will read the side effects. So why is it so controversial for people like you to be in existence and to speak up? When I first had a debate with a constituent about why I wasn't promoting this particular medicine the way other politicians were, I said, because I am seeing people who've been affected. At the very start, there was a 50-year-old firefighter in my constituency who took a blood clot, was put into a COVID ward. If that man had contracted COVID, he would have been dead. I contacted the health minister, who promptly acted and removed that person from that ward and put him into a side ward. The minister knew about this at the earliest stages of the rollout. I had 12 ladies who came to me, all of the age at that time, because the rollout, of course, started at the most elderly and worked down, who were going through menopause. And whilst some came in as a group, some came individually, they were all told the same thing. They all had the same consistent message. And when they went to their GPs and their doctors and their specialists, they were told, don't believe everything you read in the internet. Now, of course, that's sound advice. We shouldn't believe everything we read on the internet. But the fact is, these people were seeking help. They had seen changes in their bodies, and they didn't understand why. Some of the cases was the menopausal cycle stopped abruptly. Others had different changes. But yet, they weren't being taken seriously. And what struck me then was, well, medicine's very serious. Of course, medicine it's brilliant that we have medicine available. But with everything, there's side effects. So I thought it would be the most normal thing that the medical professionals, the medical world, and the politicians would pick it up and support people, or start to support people. But it was the opposite. When I said this on social media, it was Twitter, to my constituent, I says, the reason why I'm not comfortable in promoting a certain medicine or particular medicine is because it has side effects. And people have to be able to make up their own minds. And then the question was posed, so of course, this is to protect us from COVID. Yes, medicine usually is there to protect people from things. So he asked me a very naive question, and I probably was naive to answer it. But he says, so how many people do you see in your constituency who have suffered from COVID, and how many people have you seen suffering from vaccine injury? And I said, truthfully, at the time, the numbers are very small, but it's about even. And that started a pile-on social media that I'd never experienced before. And we had mainstream media reposting or retweeting or quoting my tweet, saying, this is sensational. Paul Frew is saying that there's more people suffering COVID injury than there is, or the same amount of people suffering COVID injury as there is COVID. I didn't say such a thing. I said I was dealing with people, and the numbers were small, but it's about even at the minute. So is that not enough to send the alarm bells off? But no, the media didn't pick it up in the way they should have. They sensationalised the fact that I was some anti-vax conspiracy theorist. Which I'm not anti-vax, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I do not believe everything I read on the internet, and I am very careful what I tweet out. And then, of course, one journalist actually says she felt nauseous at the fact that I was raising this. And so the media started to push out that we were anti-vax, and that people who had concerns and were raising valid questions were conspiracy theorists. And it was to diminish those people, to diminish me. But I could see the evidence before my eyes. I could see the people entering my office seeking help. And as my campaign, if you like, of awareness grew around Northern Ireland, people from all over the province were contacting me. Now, there's certain protocols in political life whereby if someone connects to me from Fermanagh South Tyrone, what I'm supposed to do is say, well, look, you need to contact your MLAs, your 5 MLAs in Fermanagh South Tyrone. And what I was getting back was, well, I've tried that. And when I go in with a vax injury, they tell me that, oh, no, I can't help you because I'm pro-vaccine. Which is an absolute disgrace. Because we're all pro-medicine. But we understand that medicine have side effects that can affect us all differently, more seriously than others. So there's nothing conspiratorial about what I'm saying. There's nothing extreme about what I'm saying. And the fact that you guys are here in existence and have been injured by medicine is nothing new. People have been injured by medicine since medicine was invented. So why then is the political world trying to ignore you? Why is the media, mainstream media, trying to ignore you? And why is some in the medical profession scared to speak out and acknowledge you? And that's what we need to do to try and raise awareness. And I believe the reason being is because they're bought in. They're bought in. The political world was the people who brought in the restrictions and who also brought in the vaccine certification scheme, which is horrendous because it discriminated against people who didn't want to take the vaccine, which is fair enough. But there's also people who were coerced into taking this medicine. And don't get me wrong, there's people who gladly lined up to get this vaccine. It was promoted by the government, who you're supposed to trust. It was promoted by media, mainstream media, who you're supposed to trust. And it was promoted by our medical professionals and our trusts, who you're supposed to trust. But why will they not acknowledge? Because one of the biggest issues I face as a constituency MLA, trying to help you guys who have been injured, is that there are no clear pathways to healthcare. If you've been fortunate enough that your GP or your consultant acknowledges that you've been vaccine injured, you've passed the first step. But in truth, many medical professionals talk to me in private, in secret, because they're scared to come out. And they've told me they just don't know what to do with people who are vaccine injured. And in fact, in some cases, they're even scared to put it in reports. And so, whilst I believe long COVID is a thing and a very serious condition, I believe there's a lot of people out there who have been vaccine injured who have been diagnosed with long COVID simply because it's the easiest thing to do in some cases. And so that disguises the real problem with people, and it means that you're blocked from a clear pathway of healthcare and recovery. And the first step that we need to do is get a recognition and acknowledgement that there are people who are vaccine injured and that there are people who are vaccine injured and bereaved. And here's the thing. Whenever you get somebody in mainstream media to acknowledge that, or get politicians to acknowledge that, then they say, well, you know something, it's very rare. And then they'll say, but look how many lives the vaccine has saved. Well, I'm sorry, but that's a moot point. And I'll tell you why it's a moot point. It's because this could be the best medicine in the world. This medicine could even bring immortality, for all I care. It doesn't, by the way, but it could. And if it injures people, we still need to acknowledge that. And that acknowledgement is not being recognised. It's not done. And when it is recognised, then you're told it's very rare. Well, I'm sorry, but if you've been vaccine injured or bereaved, to be told that you're very rare, it's an insult. It's an absolute insult. Because I don't care whether there's one of you, or whether there's 10 of you, or whether there's 200 of you, or whether there's many, many more. You all need recognised, you all need acknowledged, and you all need support. And you ain't getting it. The people who are fortunate to have received care and attention from medical practitioners, GPs, consultants, and others within the medical field who have been identified as being vaccine injured. You have a hope. You have hope. But there are so many people yet to get to that stage. There's so many people yet to move off step one. And so we need to ensure that your voice is heard out there. So what we have done, and I've worked with VIBS NI, and these are a tremendous amount, these people are tremendous. The hard work that they've put into this group is exceptional. It's phenomenal. And I want to applaud them all for the work they do. And you'll notice that every single one of them spoke about something different. And that's what they all bring to this group. But we need help. We need people to step up and join as volunteers. There's no pressure. You won't be conscripted and you won't be forced to do anything. But we just need support because we need this group to grow, because there are people out there who aren't aware. There's people out there who aren't aware they're injured by vaccine. And so they need to be made aware and need to be recognised. In order to do that, we need to make sure if we raise awareness, then people will not be able to ignore us for much longer, both in the political world and the medical world and the media, for what we care. So you're not alone. And I'm so glad that that's the catchphrase that this group has adopted, because the people who are injured tell me all the time that they feel isolated, they feel alone. I've had one person who said that they feel that they're a freak. Now, if you're injured and need medical attention, there should be no way in this world that you should feel like that. No way in the world that you should feel like that. So we need to make sure we wrap our arms around people who are injured, and we need to ensure that you're given the recognition that you deserve in order that you get the health care that you deserve. And at the minute, the health service is failing you. It's failing people who have been injured by vaccine. So I'm here to tell you that I'm here for the long haul, and I won't stop speaking about people who have been vaccine injured. People can smear me with slogans of anti-vax all they want, or conspiracy theorists. They can call me whatever names they want, but I'm here to represent the most vulnerable. I'm here to represent the most isolated in society. And at the minute, the people who I see are isolated the most are people who have been vaccine injured and bereaved. So this group is here to help. This group is here to support. What we need to know is how we can support you best. And so the questionnaires that are on your desk, and there are more available, if on the chairs, if you could fill them in, we'd be gladly appreciative. If you can volunteer, we'd be really mightily glad to see you in the group. And we'll try and garner the support that you need, that fits your needs as best we can. We also recognise that a lot of people will have specific needs and different needs. And if we can signpost in that regard, then we will. But we will not leave you alone. You do not have to suffer anymore in silence. There's people who are vaccine injured who can't even have a conversation with their family members. And that's just sad. It's just so sad. So we're here to support you as best we can. Until we can correct this nut, until we can raise awareness, until we can get this out into the mainstream, we will keep fighting for you to ensure that that is. We are organising an event, Stormont, in order that we can invite the Chief Medical Officer and other Department of Health officials. And in order for us to do that, the rules of Stormont say that before I can sponsor an event in Stormont, I need 3 signatures of MLAs. And the way the rules work in Northern Ireland, I need somebody from the Unions community, which is me, and I need somebody from the Nationalist community, a member. And can I say that I have asked members of the SDLP, and they have come back to me to say that it is now their party policy that they will not sign to sponsor this event. Now, to be fair in Sinn Féin, I haven't asked anybody from Sinn Féin yet. But I will, because we need this event to take place, and because of the rules of engagement, if you like, in Stormont, we can't host an event in Stormont unless we have support from across the divide. So if any of you guys have any influence on SDLP MLAs or Sinn Féin MLAs, please knock their door. Please tell them who you are. Please tell them what your experiences are, and ask them, just ask them to simply co-sponsor the event for VIBS NI. They don't have to like it. They don't have to be there. They don't have to listen to it. They just need to sign so the event can take place. Because at the minute, your voice is being silenced in the seat of power that is our Parliament up on the hill, which is Stormont. That's meant to represent you. So if you have any influence on the SDLP or Sinn Féin, simply because they're nationalist politicians and I need a nationalist co-sponsor, there's no hardship in this for them. They don't have to agree with the message. They don't have to acknowledge it even. They just have to sign it to allow it to take place. So if anybody can influence anyone in that sphere, please. I'm still trying my best. I'm still trying to encourage. But because the SDLP now has made it party policy that no one should sign an event for the vaccine injured, then we are really up against it in the political sense. But that just typifies what we've always known and what we've lived through these last 2 years with regards to our political world. So thank you all for coming. Thanks for listening to me. Thank you for listening to all these people. These are good people who are here to help you, and they will strive to do their best. We won't get everything right. We can't get everything right, but we will try our best. Thank you.
Just on that, I will have some serious questions for the SDLP, so that'll be dealt with soon. Can I just before I do that, 'cause I'm going to open the floor for questions now for just a few minutes, sir, okay? So look, so you've heard some great speeches today and some heavy stuff, okay? So you've heard from Jonathan on the scientific data. You've heard from Cathy and the likes of the FOIs, Charlene and Sharon and Ken, Debbie, and some on the politics side as well. So look, I'm just going to open the floor up for just 5 or 10 minutes for any questions. So if you want to do that, then feel free to do that right now.
Did you want to ask a question?
Paul, I was just wondering, would the easiest route to do that reception at Stormont at the minute not be to go through Chris Heaton Harris? He seems to be fit to do it for other communities.
Yeah, valid point. Unfortunately, the Secretary of State has no power in Stormont itself, or it would be whatever way we can to get an event in Stormont, we will strive to get it. But with the rules being as they are, and this was set up at the very foundation of the Assembly, in order to stop controversy and to stop events, being embarrassing Stormont. The fledgling assembly, this rule of engagement was placed whereby you need a unionist politician, you need a nationalist politician, but you need 3 signatures. So you could have another, or you could have 2 unionists or 2 nationalists. And this is not uncommon. I would get nationalist politicians who I work with very well. My strength is always in scrutiny. And I have been on various scrutiny committees, justice, communities, enterprise, trade and investment, or economy. I have been on many, even the Public Accounts Committee, I have been on. And we work as a team. No matter what party affiliation you have, when you're in a scrutiny committee, you're there to scrutinise the department and the minister. And so I work very well with, and I've built up relationships with many nationalist politicians. And whilst we all get involved in politics for many reasons, sometimes orange and green, I know exactly where I am in the spectrum with regards to my libertarianism. I'm a conservative, conservative libertarianism. A lot of the politicians in Northern Ireland don't know where they are. They'll know if they're unionist or nationalist, but they don't know whether they're socialist or communist or capitalist or conservative. And that makes it very hard to deal with people and to negotiate with people. But to get back to your point, I have worked well and have built up many good relationships with many people from Sinn Féin and the SDLP. And so those are the people that come to me to ask me to co-sponsor an event that's close to their hearts. Now, it could be the Ulster Farmers Union. It could be something else. But every organisation usually gets to host an event. And there'll be many politicians that would sign, not actually agreeing with the policy point or the group and what they're trying to achieve, but they know it's important that voices should be heard. So I think it's really bad form that a political party would tell their members not to sign for a specific policy point or a campaign or a group. I think it's really bad form. And I will say this, when I was making speeches in the Assembly and I was getting tuts and hisses and boos whenever I was fighting against vaccine certification scheme for the discrimination it brought or lockdown measures, you could hear the silence and then you heard the tuts and the moans and the groans when I was speaking. But when I walked out of the chamber, MLAs would come up behind me and tap me on the shoulder and say, "That's a great speech. I agree with everything you said in there." And I'm saying, well, why didn't you rise up on your place and ask for an intervention and agree with me? And they said to me, oh, we couldn't do that. Our party would go through us if we did that. So you guys can apply pressure to individual MLAs to assist you guys in getting recognition. And that's why I would ask, go to your MLAs. You have 5 of them in each constituency and just ask them. And, you know, Cathy and me went to, and we'll not name him, we went to a politician with a vaccine injured case and also with Cathy's freedom of information stuff with regards to the numbers of people who have filled in the yellow card scheme. And the first thing that politician said to us was, oh, well, you know I'm pro-vax. And we says, we don't care. That's a moot point. You know, we're all pro-venison. Here's what we know. Here's the evidence. And here's who needs support. So there has to be an education. And there has been cowardice in our political world. There most definitely has been cowardice. Because there are people who say to me all the time, oh, I heard that speech, or that was a great tweet you put out. But yet they won't put out a tweet like it. That is cowardice. So we need to make sure that we can bring these people on board and we can get these people, the politicians, talking about the vaccine injured. Thank you.
I've seen some of your emails and some of the replies that you've wrote to the chief medical officer and stuff like that, and the civil servants have replied on your behalf. Obviously, was the story's not there and stuff. How do we beat down this door of own free will that you've had replies of?
Yeah.
And secondly, have you came across any more than vaccine exemption certificates like
No.
No. Oh, can you not hear me? All right. Oh, right, sorry.
Yeah.
That's the only sort of questions I have. How do we beat down that door?
The 2 issues that you've raised are very important. I've only seen one vaccine exemption certificate.
And that's mine.
Yes. And I wouldn't have said that
No,
unless
I
you had filtered that information.
I'm quite proud of, I would stand up there and tell my whole story, but...
Yeah. And the fact that it's still unbelievable that people in government, people in departments and politicians and media say that people haven't been coerced. It's unbelievable that they're saying this. Because whilst a lot of people queued up to get that vaccine because they wanted to, and it's I have no problems with those people, and it's brilliant that they were able to obtain medicine that they wanted. Absolutely no problem. There are people who have been coerced and they didn't even realise it. If you needed to go to a foreign country to see your family, you needed a vaccine to travel. That's coercion. Because there's no science around you getting vaccinated to travel. The reason, and people say, oh, but sure, people get vaccinations all the time to go to travel. That's completely, John will tell you more about this than I would, but that's completely turned on its head. Because people would get jabs to go to countries because the country they're going to, their environment, will be hostile to their immune system. So when you get the vaccinations to travel to Southeast Asia, you're getting them to protect you. You're not getting them to protect the population. There's no science behind that. This is the Kilgranny story, and it's wrong.
It's like my uncle, he lives in America, and my mother passed away of COVID pneumonia.
Yeah.
And he couldn't come to her funeral because it was his sister, obviously. Yeah. And he couldn't come to her funeral because by the time he spent in, what do you call it? Isolation or quarantine, whenever he came over, he had missed her funeral.
Yeah. The amount of young people who only got the vaccine because they wanted to go to bars and nightclubs with their friends. And Spain. On lads' holidays, girls' holidays, hen parties, stag parties. That's coercion. And sometimes I have brought in legislation around the Child Protection Disclosure Scheme, domestic violence and stalking. And I have brought this legislation in, so I know coercion. Okay, I was chairperson of the domestic and sexual violence all-party working group in Stormont. So I see coercion. I know what it looks like. And I can tell you the vast majority of people out there were coerced, even if they don't realise it. They wanted to get on with everyday life. They wanted to get on a plane to go on holidays. They wanted to go on a plane to go and see family. And they didn't need to. Yep. And so those people were coerced. And a state should never ever get to that level where they are coercing people or they are discriminating against people because of their medical history. We even had media contacting all the parties to ask them how many of their MLAs were vaccinated. Now, I'm sorry, but if Jeffrey Dawson asked me if I was vaccinated or not, Jeffrey Dawson would not get my answer, because my medical history is my medical history. It's private to me. And the only people who needs to know that is when I divulge that to people, either to a medical professional or, and like we work with this all the time. I do a lot of DLA and PIP appeals, and we have to get medical evidence. And those people then have to go to their GPs and get that medical evidence. And that medical evidence is like a yellow pages. No one should know that information unless you want to or freely divulge it. And so the media can sling their hook. They can jog on because they won't know. And that's annoyed the media, to be fair, because they don't know and they won't know whether I'm vaccinated or not, because it's my private business. And so it's the same for you. So when you were then subjected to the vaccine certification scheme and you had to test 2 days because you didn't happen to take the vaccine, that was treating you as if you were unclean. That was treating you as if you were unsafe or you were a danger to the people around you. But here's the science around vaccine certification scheme. You could be vaccinated, but you could be bunged up with COVID. And you could enter any pub, any bar, any restaurant, any venue, any stadium you wanted. But if you were unvaccinated, you had to test every 2 days and you didn't have COVID. So you were the safest person in that room. But to be honest with you, I refused to play any part in COVID vaccination certification scheme because that was discriminatory and it was coercion. The only reason why they implemented the vaccine certification scheme after they knew people were injured with the vaccine was because it was coercion. It was a tool to get more people, especially young people, vaccinated. And I believe that's unforgivable. Unforgivable.
Just while we're waiting a few more minutes for the next speaker, I also just wanted to mention what Paul Frew had said there, that The coercion was also in Debbie's case, because the dialysis unit or the member of staff from the dialysis unit turned around and said to Debbie's mom, Teresa, are you vaccinated? No, I'm not. Well, if you don't get vaccinated, it could stop your dialysis. It could affect your dialysis. If that isn't coercion, then I don't know what is. But I remember over the Christmas period when the vaccine passports came out, and I had loads of friends that were unvaccinated, youngsters. They were fit and healthy, and, like I said in my Freedom of Information request, that the youngest person to die from COVID in Northern Ireland was 38 years of age. COVID did not affect youngsters. COVID did not affect young adults, never mind youngsters. And the fact that our government allowed that to happen, the vaccine passports, just to get into a restaurant over Christmas, was absolutely ridiculous. So with no further ado, I'm actually going to ask Michael Brentnell from Brentnell Legal to come up and to discuss the legal aspect of things. Come on up, Michael. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. My apologies for being slightly late. I was held back at another event this afternoon. This is an event that people have done a lot of hard work in the background and a lot of toiled many, many hours and have gone against what is essentially a state narrative in regard to what was portrayed during this last period. I have been engaged in human rights work for over 10 years now, and I haven't seen anything like what I saw during the period of the last 2 and 3 years. We took a number of cases against the vaccine passport scheme. We took it initially in the High Court, and it went to the Court of Appeal. Both were ultimately struck down by the court. However, what I would say that the decision to withdraw them, I believe certainly, was based on two factors. It was the public opinion and certain factors that came following from that and from a legal challenge. They did not want in any way, shape or form to have this mechanism challenged or the science behind it, because if anybody has seen the judgment on this, either in the High Court or the Court of Appeal, they will see there is a complete belief in the science of it. I just caught the tail end of Paul Frew's speech there on it, and he's exactly right that anybody could have gone into a venue with fully vaccinated and would have had potentially COVID, whereas somebody who wasn't vaccinated had to be tested and had to go through the mechanisms of testing. So that in itself, we believed and we were instructed on it that it was unlawful. Within a matter of days, the scheme was pulled. I believe it was a victory, and to some degree, it was the pressure that was put onto the Health Minister and the Department of Health. But we've now moved on from that, and we're now in a position where people are gathered here because of the consequences and what has come after the vaccine scheme. I know Teresa Murphy's case has been spoken about. Debbie spoke about it. Debbie spoke about it earlier on. We have met with opposition in relation to that. The coroner who heard it and had it before him has refused that on 2 occasions. We've put evidence to him of compelling nature. It has been put forward by Dr. Asim Malhotra. We have others who have put forward statistics in relation to vaccine damage, MHRA, and other issues. That has all been put before the coroner, and again it has been refused. We now have taken it to the Attorney General. We want to force an inquest. We're putting it to the Attorney General to direct an inquest in regard to her death, because it's now gone beyond the coroner, and it is now up to the Attorney General to direct that this issue is a live issue. It is now, whilst we are now 2 years down the tracks, this has has morphed into something bigger than that. We have seen at many, many stages, even in England, we have seen where coroners have come out and ruled on vaccine deaths. There has been none in this jurisdiction, none. So we believe quite firmly that if we break the dam on this, that this will follow through. Others will then follow. I firmly believe that, and people will perk up and see what has happened to their loved ones, because this is horrendous. I had a horrendous time during COVID with a death of a family member. I was hospitalised. I was put into intensive care due to what I would describe as a direction from the health minister to cut ICU beds. Just anecdotally, my appendix burst and I was held for 3 days because there wasn't sufficient ICU beds. I was ultimately in intensive care for a period of time. I got sepsis. So I have been on the receiving end of this, and I know what has gone on here. And whilst the COVID inquiry, our firm took a conscious decision not to take part in it, because what we believed in essence was going on was nothing short of a whitewash. Now, we'll wait and see what comes about as the end result of this, but that is our view on it. So whilst we have a view on it, we'll wait and see what the outcome is, and there may be a potential challenge to that. People have spoken in respect of it, but it's our belief and our council's instructed council that this is sanitised. So pulling ourselves back round to why we're all here, I think that I am so like the work that I have seen going into it with the individuals seated to my left and Mr. Frew is exceptional, and it to counter a state narrative as powerful as it is nothing short of commendable. But it will take pressure groups, it will take legal action, and history has shown us that that's what it does take. Because if you look at the injustices of the past, it's taken pressure groups, it's taken legal action to get to a place where this then becomes the actual narrative as to what has happened. So I'm not going to take any more of your time, but what I would like to do is just commend the people who have got us to this point. There's a long, hard journey down the road, but this is the start of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. If anybody does need to speak to a solicitor, if you could hold that off right until the very end, you can go and speak to Michael personally on a one-to-one basis. Just to also let you all know, I have two valuable documents in front of me. One is the AstraZeneca document, and the other is the Pfizer document. Now, these two documents are the government protocol documents. This had to be signed by Robin Swan, Michael McBride, McArdle, and Harrison, who is the Chief Medical Officer and the Chief Pharmaceutical Officer, because everybody knows who Michael McBride is the Chief Medical Officer. In these two protocol documents, it states that any professional who comes across any vaccine-injured person, by law, is meant to inform the yellow card system. They're meant to take the vaccine-injured seriously. They're meant to report it seriously. So there's a lot of people in this audience here today that haven't actually stood up and spoken, and I know that they've been vaccine injured. And I would really like you to maybe perhaps see Shane afterwards as well. And if you want your story told and you want to your voice to be heard, speak to Shane, and you can have a one-to-one interview with Shane. You can also have your identity blocked out if you wish. If you've got children and you don't want you speaking out, maybe, for your children to be acknowledged, if you want to what's the word, keep your identity anonymous, you absolutely have the right to speak out, even on an anonymous basis. But in this document, it states as well, from the very beginning, they knew the side effects of Bell's palsy. They knew that there were side effects of Guillain-Barré syndrome, lymphadenopathy. They knew about that. They knew about myocarditis. They knew about pericarditis. It is all in the Pfizer protocol document. But this was not advertised. In the AstraZeneca document, government protocol document, which is signed by all 4 of them as well, they knew about thrombosis and thrombocytopenia as well. It's in the document. They knew about these side effects. They knew that some people were going to be injured and bereaved. And now they just want to throw everybody under the carpet, brush it all under the carpet and let this go away. Well, it's not going to happen. The other documentation that I have here in front of me, and I just want to read this out to everybody, and I don't know if you were informed, but this was the leaflet that our Department of Health put out. It's the Public Health Agency from Linnenhall Street. And on the inside of this leaflet that was sent out to everybody to get the COVID-19 vaccine jab, in the back page it says, we do not yet know whether it will stop you from catching and passing on the virus. This was the leaflet that was sent out with the vaccine to each and every person in Northern Ireland who got it. But they didn't emphasize this. They didn't emphasize this in the media, that they didn't know. It later came on further on down the line in the European Parliament, when one of the European MLAs actually questioned the lady from Pfizer and asked, was there any case studies done on the efficacy of whether this was going to stop the transmission? And they said no. But yet they pushed the vaccine passports in Northern Ireland and across the world. And yet they promoted, the media relentlessly promoted, propagandized, save granny, take your vaccine, we're not going back to normal until everybody is vaccinated. When they didn't even know the questions in the first place. So again, with any further ado, I actually want to ask Paul Lavery, please come up and speak. He runs a mental health charity for young people, and he would like to explain about the young people and over lockdowns. Come on up, Paul.
Thank you, Kathy. Hi, guys. Not scripted, not planned. I've watched for nearly 2 years now. People living in fear, you know, and I was sitting at the back of the room there, listening to Paul, listening to Darren, Charlene, and you guys at the front, and telling your stories, you know. I think this last 2 years, personally, you know, I've got to know all these people, you know. I have never in my life witnessed a scenario in life, you know, what I've witnessed in the last 2 years, you know. I've seen people living in fear for nearly 2 years, you know, been afraid to speak, you know, afraid to step forward. So for every single person that stepped forward here today, you know, fair play to you for putting yourselves out there and not being afraid to do so. My background is I run a mental health charity for teenagers, and I have done for the last 5 years, you know. So I'm well equipped and qualified to sit here and tell you my experiences, what I've seen, not just in the physical, you know, implications of what has happened through the vaccine rollout, through mental health aspect and the impact that it's had on our young people and their families. And, you know, I have witnessed firsthand what has been happening, but because of the nature of what I do, the work I do with these young people, basically I have been unable to speak my mind or say what I really feel, you know. And I will share a quick story with you because I know you are pretty pushed for time. I will share this, and I've been unable to talk about it because I have been living in fear for this last 12 months. Because fear of speaking out, stepping forward and saying what needs to be said could cost me actually the charity that I run and the kids that I represent in my hometown. You know, about 12 months ago, I went into a committee meeting, and the reality of the situation was that my entire committee had asked me to take down a podcast of me speaking freely based on the implications of the lockdown and what it was doing to our young people. And the entire committee asked me to take it down, and what they were doing in actual fact was they wanted me to take it down because they didn't agree with the people that were behind me. They didn't agree with people that had different opinions and views And where I come from, I take very, very big pride on teaching the young people that I represent and work with to be yourself, never ever to be afraid to speak your mind and be yourself, you know. The reality of the situation was they were discriminating against a group of people for having different views and opinions. And one by one, over the next 12 months, I had to watch them all step down individually, you know, which left me then in a situation where they tried to coerce me into doing something that I morally felt was wrong, you know. I could never ever sit back and let anyone, never mind people that I had confided in and people that I had trusted to run an organisation, to represent the needs of the young people that I work with, you know. They were wrong, and I stood on my own, you know. I stood on my own whilst they all stepped down individually, and I've had a bit of time to reflect, and whilst I was sitting down there listening to everybody talking, I was like, morally, I can't sit back any longer, you know. So I know the implications that could come out of this here. Listening to Paul through, I will say this here, I'm not politically motivated in any capacity, but I have been following you on Twitter for this past 12 months, and you're the only person out of our government that has stepped forward, you know. And I just want to say thank you, you know. I think it's very, very important that people need to step forward and not be afraid anymore. I've reached a stage where I will not be silenced anymore about what happened within my committee, you know. This very conversation right now, because we're tied with the Charities Commission, could have implications. I don't care, because at the end of the day, I'll finish on this. I had a conversation with them the other day, and every individual on that committee were discriminating. As chairman and founder of that charity, I said no to them. But what the Charities Commission have now told me is because all the committee members voted to discriminate, I had to listen to them. Well, I'm sorry, I disagree. You know, I will never ever be coerced or discriminate against anyone as long as I live, you know. So listen, thank you very much for giving me the time and the opportunity.
There's nothing much left to do than just to bring it to a close. So I just want to thank everyone for coming today. Can I also remind that if anyone does want to speak to Shane, please do so before you leave today, or if you prefer to do that somewhere else, a bit more private, we can also arrange that. So that's pretty much it from us. We hope to announce the next big event for Stormont in November, depending on whether we get a nationalist signature. We'll certainly be pushing for that. So look, from myself and the rest of VIBS NI, thanks very much for coming today. Thank you.